Hello, my Aloha tribe, and welcome to the Aloha Perspective, where you get a little bit of something and a whole lot of everything. Happy Monday. It is the beginning of another week. A beginning, a new beginning. Every day is a new beginning, right? Also, 113 years ago. That's right. I know the Titanic sunk on the 15th, but I'm pretty sure it hit the iceberg at the wee late hours of the 14th. I don't know. Either way, it's still sad. Still find it fascinating though. My soul sisters and I, back in 2010, took a trip, cruise up the New England coast, and we ended up in Nova Scotia as our first stop. And yeah, it's pretty wild to see where the place where it was kind of the operation zone for the Titanic. So, you know, when it sunk, and it's kind of like the home base of operations to go retrieve the bodies and whatnot. So, yeah, we went to the museum, saw artifacts that were taken off the boat, and it really kind of makes you think, yay for being alive. All right, yay for being alive. And it was ironic too that we were on a cruise and we went to go see this stuff. So, you know, and we were being chased by a hurricane, which is why, because we were supposed to go to Boston first. So, but they had to flip our trip. So, anyways, you don't need to know about that, but I'm sharing it anyways because, yeah, today would have been the last full day that the Titanic was afloat and people were just enjoying themselves. So, you know, that being said, just appreciate life, live it to your fullest, and enjoy, enjoy. So we are on day 8 of shadow work. Day 8 of shadow work. Today is the exercise, all right? I'm going to admit, okay, I struggled a little bit with this. I struggled a little with this exercise, and I'll explain why. But the exercise, write down 5 positive aspects of you and 5 negative aspects to each one. Envision how a person with those opposite characteristics would behave, then try to identify some positive aspects of how they might behave and what they might say to you if you met them. Acknowledge the strengths and show yourself compassion. Good morning, Muddy. Happy Monday. Happy Monday. Welcome to the new week. So yeah, really, I struggled with this one. I've talked about this before in my self-love. I struggle with compliments, and that includes self-compliments. Now, I'm working on my self-love, okay? But I don't stand in front of the mirror and go, well, I guess I tell people to do that, right? I am enough. I am beautiful. I'm handsome. Whatever it is you need to do to get your day rolling, and believe it. And I do believe it now. I do. You know, I'm learning how to believe these things that I'm saying to myself that are very complimentary. But when it comes to things like this, where they say something nice about yourself, it's kind of like, So if you are watching this later and not live, I'm going to ask you right now to pause your video, all right, and write down, well, before you pause your video, write down 5 positive aspects of you and 5 negative aspects to each one. Envision how a person with those opposite characteristics would behave. Then try to identify some positive aspects of how they might behave and what they might say to you if you met them. Acknowledge the strengths and show yourself compassion. Now, I'm assuming if you met them and you were losing your ever-loving mind, or you met them and you've heard things about them that you don't know. So if that's the case, pause your video now and do this, all right? For everyone who's pause. I'm telling you to pause it. I'm watching you. All right. Okay, so if you've unpaused, and for all of those still live, buddy twin, I'm gonna read you mine. But I just had a thought on this too. So 5 positive aspects. And again, I struggled. Kind, giving, compassionate, empathetic, and understanding. Now, I'm not sure I was always this way, but I've tried to be. Life circumstances, too, sorry, it was, if you're live, that probably cut out. But I'm not sure that I've always been like this or I've always acknowledged it. But like I said, when you've been through things in life, you know, you can go 2 ways. You can either become, you know, what has harmed you, or you flip the other way because you don't want people to go through what you've been through, or if they've been through what you've been through, you don't want them to feel that way, so you kind of go out of your way, probably too much, right? You try to pour from an empty cup because you can't heal yourself, so you try to heal everybody else. But I put kind, giving, compassionate, empathetic, and understanding. For the opposite, I put withhold kindness if someone is unkind, withhold generosity if someone's being a jerk. And for compassionate, empathetic, and understanding, I just put judgy, straight up judgy. Have you ever noticed that? Like, you know, we talk like, oh yeah, well, I'm compassionate. I'm like, I will straight out admit to you that I can be very judgmental. And there's no excuse for it. There really is no excuse for it. Not to someone's face, okay, but behind their back is just as bad, right? But there are certain situations and certain things where I just sit there and shake my head going, what the F are they thinking? What the hell? You know? And I don't really think that's judgy. That's just kind of your shaking your head moments. But we do have those moments where it's kind of like, you know, well, okay, I'll give you an example. A gazillion years ago when I was in London, okay, you know, everybody always, I always heard these stories, you know, nobody likes Americans overseas, nobody does it, you know, and I just kind of like, ugh, you know, and I thought, well, I'm going to be on my best behavior, which is normal because that's how I was raised, right? You know, you're raised to behave yourself in public. Well, there were these kids, and I mean, kids to me, I mean, I was in my 40s when I went, so, you know, they were kids to me, but I forgot in Europe and England, you can drink at 18. And I think these girls were taking full advantage of that. Of course, by 11:30 in the morning, they were drunk off their ass, being loud in the middle of Trafalgar Square, just kind of like, and I'm just standing there going, you know, didn't your people raise you better? But then here I am casting judgment on their parents. Their parents may not know what they're up to. You know, I mean, on my plane, on my way out there, were three guys who just, you know, in college, who just randomly said, let's have an adventure. And they went to England for the weekend. They're like, hey, let's go do something different. And they're getting off the plane going, oh my God. And so for them, it's kind of like, wow, you know, look at you. I wish I was more like that, right? But then you have these kids who are being kind of loud and no one's really paying attention to it, but I am, right? Because I'm a little like, you know, American sensitive. And I'm being judgy. And maybe it's because at their age, I didn't know how to be like that. I didn't know how to be fun. I didn't know how to just be like, I don't care what other people think. You know, they're kids. They were teenagers. And I'm sure other teenagers around the world get as goofy as they do, as they did. I mean, hell, we got adults who should know better that get that kind of goofy and loud. I mean, at least they were giggly. They were giggly fun, but here I was judging them, right? Because that was a shadow side of myself that was probably, I mean, I think outwardly it was embarrassment because it's like, come on, we have to show these people that we're better than this. But I think inwardly it was a jealousy because I couldn't cut loose like that when I was their age. I didn't know how. Everyone around me tried to show me. I told you about the conversation my dad and I had. Said, you need to lighten up. You know, you need to really lighten up. You know, enjoy your life. You know, you're too young to be acting old. So for my opposites, on how you think they would act towards you, I put standoffish, rude, judgy, angry, and lashing out, right? And for the positive, I thought, well, if they see me acting this way, maybe they'll come up to me and say, it's going to be okay. Let's bottom line this, and shows compassion. And that was the relationship I have with older sibling. You know, show compassion. Let's bottom line this. Let's, you know, let's get to the root of the problem. So whatever it is that you wrote down and the opposite, you know, put yourself in those other people's shoes, right? Put yourself in their shoes, because a lot of times we don't know what's going on. We don't. We We don't know what's happening with someone when, you know, they lose their mind. I mean, this could be a person that every day they're kind and generous and compassionate to someone. Maybe they lost somebody, maybe they broke up with someone, maybe they lost their job, and this one day you're walking down the street, you don't know them from the next person, and they're just, you know, maybe you accidentally bump into them, you, what the fuck is your problem? You know, maybe they turn around at you know, and you know, I'm going to sidetrack. I just saw Sammy's comment. At least they weren't fighting drunk. No, they weren't. They were hilarious. They were actually kind of funny when I think back on it. You know, I mean, some people were kind of looking at them, but it's like, you know what? They were kids. They were girls. You know, they were girls. They were kids. You know, I mean, they probably had brunch and had champagne and, you know, I mean, the forbidden fruits of America, right? You go somewhere else and you drink. I mean, I heard a great story about when Will Smith's oldest son turned 18, he asked to go to England for his birthday. They said, well, what do you want to do for your birthday? I want to go to England. And he duped his parents. When he went out for his birthday dinner, the first thing he did was order a drink. I mean, talk about sneaky. It's kind of like, oh, I see what you did there. But, you know, I mean, I'll be honest. There was a rule of thumb in this house on Thanksgiving Day that if you were 18 years old, you could have a wine cooler or two, provided you do not get back in a car and drive. Okay, so if you were driving, it was a no-no. All right, but you know, it was kind of like the rite of passage, right? And when Thanksgiving was always a big thing, and we had nowhere really to go, and everybody always spent the night at my parents' house. Believe it or not, in this house, which is not that big, but we managed, we made it work. So, you know, it was kind of a rite of passage. And I think a part of me, you know, I'm not proud of a lot of the behaviors I've shared on here, but I also share them because I want people to know that we're human. You know, we are going to make mistakes. We are going to be that person that's walking down the street that you might actually accidentally bump, and, you know, they turn around and just read you the riot act. And instead of getting mad saying, dude, really? Or lady, whatever, just say, you know what? I hope you have a better day. I hope your day gets better. You know, I hope your day gets better. And I know it's hard because we have to resist that. Wow, Sammy says the drinking age was actually still 18 in Georgia when she turned 18, and it changed within a couple of years. Hawaii was like that. I think it was the 80s when they changed from 18 to 21. So, darn, right? Not like it. You know, I had some sketchy behaviors when I turned 18 in Hawaii, but I had cousins that cared, although I was the worst person. I was so paranoid about everything, you know. I mean, I know I'm not promoting this kind of behavior. I'm not promoting this kind of behavior. But when I look back, I think, wow, because I told my dad a lot of this stuff. He's all, oh, I'm so glad you weren't a nerd. Just kind of like, he's not promoting bad behavior either, but you know, you kind of want your kid to be that kid that just kind of knows how to have fun. But yeah, I was super paranoid, so not the thing for me. Not the thing for me. When I turned 20 though, yeah, whatever. It's a whole nother story, whole nother show. But anyways, we're identifying these positive and negative aspects, okay? Giving you my examples, and I hope that maybe with your examples, you can come up with some solutions for these things. And like I said, one of the things, if someone's just being a complete jerk to you, you know, just bottom line it, you know, what's going on? Are you okay? You know, and if they say, well, what's that supposed to mean? Just say, well, I don't know, because you're really coming down on me hard, and I'm not sure why. You know, what did I do? What did I do to offend you? You know, or like I said, if you're walking down that street and somebody just accidentally bumps you, or you accidentally bump them, and it turns into this whole thing, just turn around and say, you know what? I don't know what's going on in your life right now, but I hope you have a better day. And I know that's a mouthful to get out, but it could change the trajectory of their day. You know, I was telling my cousin this story the other day. So I'm telling you, some wild shit happens in my life. I was on the freeway driving to work. Now, if you've ever driven on the freeways during rush hour in California, you realize that conversations from car to car can be had. I shit you not. So, Oh, so Sammy says, I'm thankful that I made it through my 20s. I wish I knew you in your 20s. Good advice to just ask folks if they're okay. We never really know. Thank you. Thank you for that. I say that because I am the last person that ever does that. I just get offended. In self-love and in doing shadow work, I'm doing my best to not be that person, that opposite person I'm talking about, but to be that person that is saying, hey, just, try to ask them, or just say, hey, you need to talk. If it's someone do you want to talk? But anyways, I was talking about the one story. This kid was, and I say kid, again, I use the word kid loosely, but he was driving like a maniac through traffic. And, traffic, people in California, I mean, it's one of those things where the bumper sticker that says, if you're going to drive this close, you might then pull my hair. I mean, people really do, like, they're not kidding when they say bumper to bumper. Not a lot of people leave what my dad calls the idiot space. And, I usually do because of things like this. This kid was weaving in and out of traffic. You can see everybody throwing on their brakes, throwing up their hands. And at one point, I just threw up my hand. And I'm just like, really? And so this kid gets into the next lane next to me. And then he just gives, he looks over like he's intimidating me, right? It's like, dude, you are literally probably half my age. It's like, you are not going to intimidate me right now. And not being belligerent or anything. It's just kind of like, really? Really? It's like one of my nieces or nephews, And I just looked over because he's giving me the eye. And I just kind of shook my head. And so then he stops and he rolls his window down. Now, mind you, all of the traffic had stopped. Now, I will say this for the kid. We managed to have this row while keeping good space and not holding up traffic. But he just yells out his window, what the F is your problem? Blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. And I said, have you even noticed how you're driving? And he's just like, well, what? I didn't hit anybody. I'm all, that's because you can't see all the brake lights behind you. And then he's just kind of, F off and then rolls up his window, right? Then he rolls it down again. He said, well, I don't know what your problem is. I didn't hit anybody. And he says it again. And I said, again, you didn't see all the brake lights. I said, I'm behind you. I can see all the brake lights that you're causing. And he's all, well, and then he gets kind of dumb. And then I just told him, I said, one wrong move and you're going to end up dead. And I said, do you really want your mama to find you, at the coroner's office? And he's just kind of like, he told me to F off again. And I'm just kind of like, and I'm kind of, at this point, I'm just kind of like, uh-oh, because he won't stop. And so, we're rolling along a little bit more. And then he stops. And I told him, I said, and he rolls down his window again. And before he can say anything, I just said, you know what? I said, look, I'm not trying to be mean. And I said, I'm not your mother. But I said, I want you to get home safely. And he literally looks at me and he says, well, I rolled down my window because I wanted to tell you I'm sorry and you're right. But at this point, believe it or not, I was furious. I was furious because it's like, it's like it was bad enough that we're having this conversation while we're driving because we're not totally paying attention to the road, which is just as dangerous. But it was just kind of like, and it's like, and for once I wasn't the one that started it, but, I'm like Superman. I like to stand up for the little guy, but, no, just kidding. But yeah, Sammy said, wow. Yeah. And that's what I said. I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, yeah, he's like, I am really sorry. And I kid you not, guys, for the rest of that drive, he was like using his blinker and I mean, using it appropriately. Okay. One of my biggest pet peeves, I mean, older sibling says you should start a blinker school, is when people are driving and the way they use their blinker when they're just changing lanes. If there's no one behind you and it's an open freeway, whatever. But when you're in traffic, your blinker is supposed to be, hi, may I please come over, not hi, here I come. Okay? And yes, that is one thing I will be judgy about till the day I die, because that's how accidents happen. All right. Now, I don't know how we moved into that, but I'm telling you my blinker issue. But no, this kid was using his blinker and everything. And then, when he was getting off to go onto the other freeway, he actually got in front of me and waved. It blew my mind. It blew my mind. I got to work and I still had that bewildered look on my face, and my friend comes up and they're all, are you okay? And I'm all like, I just had the wildest drive to work. But, it's like my dad always says, when two people meet, when two bad drivers meet, bad things are going to happen. And that's the same with life. When two people who are going through a lot are going to meet, it can cause problems. It can cause a brawl. It can cause, something fatal if it comes down to that, because, you don't know what other people are carrying on them, or whatever. You don't know where their anger is from. Most people who are angry at something in life that is probably nothing to do with the situation. It has everything to do with the pain that they have stored within themselves, that they have never healthfully let go, because, we don't know how to let it go. A lot of people, I love this show called Bones. All right. It's an older show, and I admit I'm just watching it now. My dad and I have been binging it, but he's seen it. But they kind of, run around the psychology issue. Now therapy is kind of the thing now, but it's like, well, don't use your psychology on me. And that's the one thing I don't understand. People who love science don't really, buy into psychology. And yet psychology is science of the brain. It's science of the soul and the emotions. So that's what kind of baffles me about that sometimes. It's just, I'm not telling you to run out to therapy because you had problems, but I'm telling you therapy is one of the things that saved my life. And that's one of the reasons why I'm a mental health advocate, because of things like shadow work, of things like this, where we point out our 5 positive aspects of ourselves and 5 negative things that go along with it. I would have never understood any of this stuff. I didn't discover shadow work until between my 2 sessions of therapy, when in 2017 and 2023. But in the middle there is where I discovered it. And it was just kind of like, oh, I've never seen House. Okay, I'm gonna have to put that on my list too. I think it's on my list, but Sammy says she loves Bones too. It's a good show. It's a really good show. I love the crime aspect of it, and the solving it, and all the science that goes in it. It's just amazing. But anyways, but no, they talk about a lot of that. And what's interesting is the show kind of covers those shadow aspects. Why are you so mad at these kinds of people? Why do you not like those kinds of people? What happened where it's like, this, that, and the other. And I mean, when we look at TV shows, we look at movies, we look at music, we can fit it in to our emotions. Maybe you're going through something totally horrible, right? And you throw on an album and you're just like, yeah. Or you hear something and it makes you cry because it speaks to your soul. Because it's like you feel seen, you feel heard. You feel like someone there is saying, I see you. And, even though it's someone you've never met and you're listening to a song that it could be the first time you've ever heard it. These things happen to us for a reason, because we need to get this stuff up and out of us. And that's what shadow work does for us. It teaches us that instead of knee-jerking, when somebody bumps into us, we just turn around and say, look, you know what? If this were me that this happened to, how would I want them to react? If I bumped into them and said, F you, watch where you're going. Would I want them to turn around and be angry? Or would I want them to turn around and just try to show me some compassion? And that's what we have to do. We have to put ourselves in that other shoe. And maybe they are just an asshole. Maybe they're just one of those people in life that's just, the world is mine, get out of my effing way. Effing way. I'm surprised I'm not dropping any F-bombs today. But must not be feeling it since it's Monday. But no, seriously, and for those people, just, have a good day. Sorry about that. I hope you have a better day. And, just if they say something, just, yeah, exactly what Sammy says. Do unto others. Do unto others as you would want to have done unto you. Is that the line? I don't know. It left my brain. Like, as quickly as I was saying it, it left my brain. But yeah, do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. I mean, that's a straight up, super advice, right? Super advice. How do we want to be treated? We can't treat people horribly and expect them to just turn around and be kind to us for it. But we can hope. Oh, good. Thank you. all that tuition for Catholic school. Got to make sure that they, it was worth it, right? But but truly, we're going to come into situations that are going to test our patience. We're going to come into situations that are going to hit us upside the head, and they're either going to find their own way to resolve itself, or it's going to feel like it just got worse. But we do not need to be the ones to add the fuel to the fire. Catholic school is coming out. It's like I was telling my cousin the other day, because I'm not really religious anymore, but I said, well, you can take the girl out of Catholic school, but you can't take the Catholic school out of the girl. So, and it's the truth. I mean, I think that's what ties my mom and I together still, even though she's gone. So, I'm a lapsed Catholic, but, I will always be a Catholic through and through. And, whatever. So, but I am a polytheist, and for those that don't know what that is, it's a person that believes in more than one deity. So, it was funny because I was thinking about this the other day, and I was like, if I were to ever find, I was talking with sibling the other day. I had to rush home because we had a sick kitty, and we weren't sure if the sick kitty was going to make it through the night, but he did. I held him for a bit, worked on him a bit with my special brand of Mommy Shelly work, and he was better. But we were sitting there watching a TV show, and I said, if I were ever to be religious again, I might be a Buddhist. And I said, just because they're so zen, right? But I mean, that's just, to me, I mean, I don't care if you're religious. I know Sammy is. I don't go to church. I don't do all those things, and I don't know why. It's just my spiritual path took me in a different direction. And to fit that into the shadow work part here, so, because, I'm moving in 9 different directions now, to put this back into the shadow aspects, it's because a lot of stuff doesn't fit me anymore. It's like putting on a pair of pants that are either too big or too tight. But my path that I'm on, it fits me and it suits me. And it's just a lot of different teachings from a lot of different things. I like to learn, and I like to learn about other people's religions, and I like to, theology in its expanse. But I find nature to be my church. I find the ocean to be my church. And for all the deities that do sit at my spiritual council table, I'm grateful, because everybody has a place. I admit God is the head of the board there, but I'm used to him. He's been the dude since, or they have been the dude. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. I don't want to step on any toes here. I don't want to offend anyone. That this is just my personal beliefs. But when we bring it into the shadow aspects, a lot of these different things help me through my shadow work. Some of the problems that I have found is, and I know Sammy and I are on the same page with this, but there are certain people that take the good word, right, the good book, and hit people with it. Not physically, but they take parts out of it that suit them. And that's not right. That's not right. They make you fear God. They make you fear whatever deity it is that you put your trust and faith in. And with Buddhism, that was never the case. There was never a reason to be, afraid, But let's see. Sammy says your path is working for you. I've read about all other religions, and they pretty much all feel the same way about treating others the way you want to be treated. Exactly. It's not right. Really, this is exactly it. It's not really rocket science. Whether you were an atheist or you are a church-going person, we all want to be treated the same way we treat other people. I mean, I had a very unique upbringing. My father was raised in a pretty hardcore religion. And so by the time I was born, no, he was not religious anymore. I always joke that depending on the day, he is either an atheist or agnostic. And now an agnostic is a person that believes there might be someone out there. Atheist, nothing. All right. You all know this. But my mom was very Catholic. My mom would walk her. I mean, I saw where my mom grew up now. So because I used to say, oh my God, you used to walk yourself to church. But yeah, it really was around the corner. But yeah, she'd be like 7 or 8 years old, and she'd walk herself to church if nobody could take her. So it was a very unique upbringing because my dad, because of the religion he was in, really knew the Bible better than my mom and I did. But and still does in a way, you know, from time to time it just comes up. But yeah, depending on the day is what he is. But when I say it was a very unique upbringing, it kind of is the shadow aspect, right? You have one side and you have the other. And the other side can be pretty judgy, you know? I mean, look at all the religions that ban certain people, right? Look at all the people who won't accept certain people. And yet you have these other churches where it's like, please, just come right in. We don't care. You know, if you believe in God or whoever your deity is, we got you. We got you. And, you know, we're just all here to be the children of whoever, children of God, children of Buddha, whatever. You know, I mean, Buddha was not a deity. He was a man. And interestingly enough, I read that story on Buddha, and it was a very fascinating story because his father was basically a king and kind of a warlord in his time, you know, and little Buddha was just like, I'm out, bye. So oh, Sammy says, I have an atheist friend who can quote the Bible way better than most of the churchy people I know. Yeah, and it's weird. I don't want to say the religion my father used to be in when he was growing up, but I'm not going to say it. But if you ask me in the comments, I will tell. But yeah, it wasn't Catholic. But yeah, but you know, I mean, he didn't care. The whole plan was, you know, my parents talked about it. I would be raised in the Catholic religion, but when I turned 18, I was on my own. You know, I could decide what I wanted to, and my mom had no input. And obviously at 18, you're an adult, but my dad made that very clear. Of course, I was born in January, and my mother said, well, you know, the deal was until you're out of high school. Whatever. That was not the deal, but I still went. And, you know, now it does keep me close to my mom. But yeah, we kind of rolled out of the shadow work, didn't we? But in a way we didn't, because we are talking about this stuff. We're talking about how, you know, the climate right now, the political climate. You know, I don't want to go into politics in a show that's about shadow work. But in a way, we're kind of rolling into it because you have a lot of people that are mistreating a lot of people, trying to take away certain rights because they don't believe it. Well, what you believe is different. You know, this is America that I'm preaching from. You know, we're supposed to have rights. We're supposed to have free speech. We're supposed to make choices for ourselves. Lots of people aren't going to agree with the choices I've made in my life, but they're my choices. And some of my choices are the choices I've had to live with my entire life, that I had to find a way to make peace with. And that's really where a lot of this shadow work comes in. Instead of, you know, walking down the street and denying somebody who they are, just love them. Because you don't know what they're going through. Yeah, see? Amen. Free speech and freedom of religion. Exactly. Exactly. Free speech and freedom of religion. You know, people should be able to worship the way they want to. You know, there are other countries where, you know, I remember when not the Gulf War, but whatever the one in 2000 was, okay? And as the war rolled on, you know, and this isn't about the war, I'm not going to bring politics into that part, but, you know, Sibling and I were watching, and it's like there were some people who were Catholic, and they had to worship in secrecy. I mean, we're talking about the 21st century, right? And people are still worshiping in secrecy. We shouldn't have that. We shouldn't be, you know, running down people with the good word when you're not preaching the good word. God isn't about fire and brimstone, okay? When you really stop and think about it, Jesus was a damn hippie, all right? Peace, love, joy, you know, love one another, you know, love your fellow person. Jesus didn't care what you looked like, who you were with, or, you know, how tall you were. His whole point was to spread love. And when we struggle with our shadow, we can't do that. We get lost in our shadows. We get lost in who we are, because we are in so much pain, because we are so lost in whatever it is that you know, hurts us. I love that. Jesus is definitely a hippie. I've been saying that for years. Yeah, totally. He totally was. So my understanding is the difference between a flower child and a hippie is a little bit more political. So, and Jesus was. Believe it or not, Jesus was. I mean, come on. 12 years old and he turns over the tables in the temple. Flower. But I would say that he was kind of a mixture of both, you know. But I mean, a hippie is, you know, they're the flower child to the nth degree. You know, they become the vocal ones. So, Sibling says I'm a flower child because I really try not to get involved too much in politics, although lately it's been hard. But that is all I will say about that. But yeah, so I know I've been all over the page on this, but if you really stop and think about it, a lot of what we talked about today has a lot to do with shadow work. Why we treat people the way we do, the people that hit, you know, figuratively, people with their Bible. Those people are probably in pain. Those people are probably hurting. They were probably raised like my father, but instead of escaping, you know, that pain and creating their own path, they just, you know, continue the cycle. Sometimes it's a generational cycle, and we have to figure out who's going to be brave enough to stop it. You know, who's going to be brave enough to say no. You know, I'm ending it here. This is not how I believe. I mean, in Catholicism, a lot of it's not necessarily fire and brimstone, but it's like, well, if you don't do this, you're going to hell. If you commit suicide, you're going to hell. My mom and I had a big conversation about that in my teens. And I think this might have been the first signs that, you know, to me, that I missed of having depression. But I was probably in my late teens. And, you know, I said, well, I don't think people who commit suicide go to hell. And she's like, well, I don't understand. You know, she's all, the Bible says. And it's like, I don't care what the Bible says. And that did not go over well. But it's like, I don't care what the Bible says. You know, the Bible says God is a loving God. So maybe he's just saying, you know, patting him on the head going, I'm really sorry. You weren't ready for this yet. Come back, and when you're ready, we'll try again. No, they go to hell. Why would they go to hell? Well, because you took a life God gave you. It's like, come on. Really? We tend to judge people who have mental health issues. I get judged from time to time, but I don't back down, because a lot of people I find that judge me are people that I recognize have a lot of the same issues. With that, let's see. Oh yeah, see, Sammy agrees with me. I don't think that people who commit suicide are going to hell either. In my own spiritual work, I've come to see hell as more of a place of where you face your reckoning. If you've ever seen the show Lucifer, which is actually a pretty good show, okay? My sister and I watched it and we're like, this is nothing like we expected. I kind of expected to feel like that, you know? And I don't want to ruin it for you because it really is a good show. I think a lot of people won't watch it just because it's called Lucifer. But, you know, he does a lot of shadow work in his show, you know, himself. And come on, it's Tom Ellis. I mean, better watch it for the dude, okay? So, I hope, sorry. Oh, I went there. But no, seriously, it is a really good show. And, you know, because, I don't know, I have a lot of opinions. Maybe I'll make that into another show one day. I don't know. We'll see. But whether you agree with my opinions or not, the whole point is that whether you are religious or not religious, we all live by a golden rule. And that is the do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. And if you're going to hurt somebody just for the fun of it, don't expect them to, you know, turn around and love on you, okay? I mean, you may be that kind of person that's just mean. And if you are and you're watching this, stop it. But if you're watching this, more than likely, you're a person that might lash out because you're in pain. You don't have to have a childhood trauma or an adult trauma for that to happen. You could lose a job, you can lose a relationship, you know, maybe a friend has kind of ignored you because maybe they fell in love, right? And sometimes we feel like we don't have what they have, or, you know, I mean, I went through a period where it was really hard because all my cousins and friends were getting married and having kids, and here I was. And I was just kind of like, you know, wow. And I was jealous, and they didn't have time for me anymore. And instead of taking that personally, just, you know, find other people. And then when that person's available, then be there with them. you know, but don't take it personally. People, we change. Every day we're changing. Everyday life changes. And this is what shadow work helps us with. It helps us move through that. Karma, baby, indeed. But for the most part, you know, just try, and I will do this too, try to react differently. Don't knee jerk, don't trigger. Because you know what? When you do that, you're also healing yourself, because you're realizing, hey, you know, even though I didn't get this when that happened to me, I'm showing compassion to somebody else, which means if I can show it to someone else, I can show it to myself. So remember, at the bottom of this, it says, acknowledge the strengths and show yourself compassion. Give yourself some empathy, okay? So I hope everybody has a wonderful, wonderful day. Tomorrow is day 9 and the last day of shadow work. And we're going to go over the key points that we talked about throughout this last week and a day. So again, have a great day, everybody. I'll see you back here tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. Pacific time, Facebook Live. All lives are public. Anybody can watch under Shelly Marie Lucas. You can find me across the board on social media, either under Shelly Marie Lucas, the Aloha Perspective, or on Twitter, Shellbell's Quest. I would like to thank Sammy for being on. It's like my co-host, right? She's like my co-host during this shadow work stuff. I'm enjoying this. So, yeah. So have a great day, everybody. Thank you again so much for watching. Muddy, to my Muddy, have a wonderful, wonderful Monday. And, yeah, have a great day, everybody.